What if I told you there are revolvers so extreme they blur the line between sidearm and artillery? Guns that can drop a grizzly bear, crack an engine block, or punch through body armor like it's paper. For over a century, wheel guns have evolved from black powder war horses to modern hand cannons that defy physics. Some tamed the Wild West, others rewrote ballistics tables. Each one earned its place through raw power, mechanical genius, or battlefield legend. So here's the question. If your life or your hunt came down to one pull of the trigger, which revolver would you trust? Stay tuned, because we're counting down the fiercest handguns ever built. Like and subscribe to Firearm Standard for more real-world firepower breakdowns. Diamondback SDR. The Diamondback SDR is the new school entry on this list. It's a purpose-built defensive revolver that blends classic wheelgun reliability with modern manufacturing. Mechanically, it is a 6-shot, double-action revolver chambered for .357 Magnum with short barrel options, 2 and 3 inch. The design borrows proven features. The push-button cylinder release familiar from Kimber, a rebated cylinder approach derived from Ruger, and uniquely fluted chambers that cut mass without sacrificing strength. The frame and barrel use stainless steel with finish choices like high polish or a black nitride tactical option. Where the SDR stands out is the trigger. Reviewers repeatedly highlight a light, consistent double-action pull that translates directly into faster and more accurate follow-up shots in high-stress defensive scenarios. That smoothness matters. An intuitive trigger helps close the gap between target acquisition and effective hits when milliseconds count. Ergonomics are tuned for modern shooters, compact grip geometry, low-bore axis, and serviceable sighting that balances concealability and pointability. For an American defensive user, the SDR is pitched as a practical, immediate option. It doesn't chase extreme Magnum ballistics. Instead, it refines the interface between shooter and machine. Predictable trigger, controlled recoil, and durable materials. In short, it proves that revolver innovation still produces meaningful gains for people who carry or trust a handgun to stop a threat. Price near $800. Colt 1860 Army. The Colt 1860 Army is a black powder cap-and-ball revolver that served as the primary sidearm for Union cavalry in the American Civil War. With an 8-inch barrel and 6 chambers, its balance and weight made it suited for mounted use. It weighed roughly 2.7 pounds, a figure that reads heavy by modern standards but provided a steady sighting platform for the era's effective ranges. Ballistically, the 44 round of the 1860, when loaded with heavy ball and a full charge, delivered stopping power that could incapacitate a man or a horse at combat distances typical for cavalry engagements. In practice, cavalry troopers often carried multiples, increasing total shot count and combat persistence. Beyond raw performance, the 1860's significance is social and logistical. Over 200,000 produced, widely used by officers and enlisted men, and prized by both sides. Capturing one was a strategic gain because of that reliability. Narratively, the 1860 is presented as a tool that shaped outcomes. In close combat and cavalry actions, rate of fire, balance, and ease of reloading mattered. The 1860's design gave mounted troops a better chance at close engagements and served as a force multiplier in raids and charges. The revolver's legacy is not technical novelty so much as battlefield practicality, simple, robust, and lethal in the hands of trained users. Priced near $1,000 for reproductions. Webley-Fosbury Automatic Revolver. The Webley-Fosbury Automatic Revolver is an outlier, a recoil-operated revolver that used the gun's recoil to cycle the barrel and cylinder assembly, automatically cocking the hammer for the next shot. Produced in the early 1900s, it came in .455 Webley and offered a semi-automatic rate of fire while retaining revolver reliability. The distinct zigzag cylinder groove and sliding barrel assembly marked it visually and mechanically. Functionally, this system reduced the need for heavy double-action pulls or manual cocking between shots. For target shooters and some officers, the Fosbury's smooth single-action style trigger for rapid fire was a clear advantage. In wet or muddy conditions, however, its moving parts were vulnerable, an important operational detail that limited widespread adoption in harsh field conditions. Culturally, the Webley-Fosbury gained a mystique. It showed designers were willing to experiment with hybrids of revolver and semi-auto principles. For users, it offered a unique trade: faster follow-up shots with a lighter trigger at the cost of greater mechanical complexity and sensitivity to grime. In measured hands on controlled ranges, its advantage could be decisive. In the mud of battle, simple robustness often won. priced near $2,000 for originals. Chiappa Rhino. The Chiappa Rhino flips a core assumption. Instead of firing from the top cylinder chamber, it fires from the bottom. That lowers the bore axis relative to the shooter's hand and redirects recoil straight back instead of rotating the muzzle upward. For a .357 Magnum revolver, that design reduces muzzle rise and allows faster, more accurate follow-ups. Construction uses a light aluminum frame in some models to keep carry weight down, and the Rhino's aesthetic is intentionally alien: angular lines and a forward-leaning profile. The human factor is central. Felt recoil is reduced and controllable, making Magnum-level rounds more manageable for a wider range of shooters. Competitive shooters and some defensive users favor the Rhino because it enables rapid, accurate strings of fire compared to conventional top-barrel revolvers. Performance notes: you'll still feel Magnum recoil, but the momentum stays in line with the arm instead of pitching the muzzle. That geometry converts to better real-world shot placement, particularly in fast defensive or competitive drills. The Rhino proves an engineering idea. Align the recoil impulse with the shooter's wrist, and the gun becomes easier to drive. No magic, just applied mechanics. Price near $1,000. Nagant M1895. The Nagant M1895 is a study in purposeful compromise. Not the loudest, not the fastest, but mechanically clever in a way that directly changed tactical options. Its signature trick was the forward-moving cylinder that sealed the gap between cylinder and barrel when the hammer fell. That gas seal turns a revolver into something closer to a suppressed pistol. A marginal increase in velocity, yes, but more importantly, the ability to reduce the telltale blast that gives away a shooter's position. In cold, cramped urban work or clandestine operations, silence is often as valuable as stopping power. When discretion matters more than flash, the Nagant gives you an answer. On paper, it's a humble cartridge. The 7.62 .38mm wasn't built to outrun modern Magnums. In practice, the system gave Soviet handlers options others lacked. Operational history ties the Nagant to state security services and a steady presence from pre-World War I through the mid-20th century. That makes the M1895 a weapon equal parts tool and symbol, reliable, well-made in mass quantities, and engineered for specific mission profiles that prized concealment and simplicity. Mechanically, the Nagant's moving parts invite admiration and the occasional complaint. The forward cylinder seal required tight tolerances and careful maintenance. Dirty conditions reduce its advantage. Still, the design asks a practical question. Is an extra fraction of velocity worth trading complexity for a quieter report? For certain operators, the answer was yes. The Nagant is the revolver that proves innovation isn't always about raw energy. Sometimes it's about changing the rules of engagement. Price near $200. Colt New Service M1917. When the United States mobilized for the First World War, pistols were in short supply. Colt's New Service M1917 wasn't a glamorous invention. It was a necessity turned legend. By adapting a large-frame revolver to fire 45 ACP via half-moon clips, Colt gave doughboys a reliable sidearm that used the same stopping round as the M1911 pistol. Two facts matter most: the round and the ability to keep firing when other designs might fail in muck and steel. In the trenches, simplicity and dependability aren't marketing claims. They're survival math. The M1917's solid steel frame shrugged off adverse conditions that jammed early semi-autos. Put the muzzle to a throat and pull the trigger. There's no slide to bind, no ejection to fail. When a pistol needs to be a tool and a club, the M1917 did both. It served in later conflicts too, prized for reliability in close quarters and chaotic environments. Soldiers who trusted it didn't do so because it was fashionable. They did because it worked. What lesson does the M1917 teach modern users? That mechanical reliability and shared logistics can trump flash. In a world that loves innovation, sometimes the blunt, reliable solution is exactly what wins a fight. Would you rather field the fanciest new design or the one you can count on when everything else goes sideways? Price near $800. LeMat Grapeshot Revolver. The LeMat Grapeshot Revolver is one of those designs that makes you stop and ask, who thought of this, and why wasn't it illegal? It's a hybrid in the most literal sense, a multi-chamber revolver surrounding a central shotgun barrel. In practice, that meant 9 rounds of ball followed by a single devastating grapeshot blast. For cavalry officers and battlefield commanders who needed a psychological and physical edge at close ranges, the LeMat was a brutal answer. Think about the fight at the mouth of a charge. Your enemy is closing, pistols are emptying, and momentum decides the day. Flip the hammer forward, and you don't just hurt one man, you create instant room-clearing firepower from the same handgun. That single 20-gauge blast turned tactical math in an instant. Only a few thousand were made, and they were smuggled through blockades, which makes the LeMat as much a statement as a weapon. If you could get one, you had an edge. Technically, the LeMat is kludgy by modern standards. It's heavy, complicated, and sensitive to maintenance. But complexity can be worth it when the design answers a specific tactical problem with raw effectiveness. Would you face a revolver that can end a melee with a single flick? For Confederate officers who carried one, the answer was a confident yes, priced near $1,500 for reproductions. Smith & Wesson Registered Magnum. The Smith & Wesson Registered Magnum is where revolvers stop being mere sidearms and start becoming answers to evolving threats. Introduced in 1935 as the world's first .357 Magnum production revolver, these were custom-built pieces, buyer choice of barrel, sights, and grips, and they carried a price tag that read like a status symbol during the Depression. But this wasn't decadence, it was a tactical response. Police and lawmen needed something that could deal with faster cars, armor, and hardened criminals. The .357 provided velocity and penetration that ordinary service calibers couldn't match. Ballistically, the Registered Magnum rewrote expectations. A 158-grain bullet at over 1,500 feet per second was a dramatic increase in terminal performance. Suddenly, a handgun could punch through thin sheet metal and deliver meaningful energy at extended handgun ranges. For law enforcement, that translated into a tool that could stop threats that regular revolvers could not. The Registered Magnum didn't invent the Magnum idea, it made it mainstream and respectable. Culturally, the revolver bridged eras, hand-fitted craftsmanship married to modern ballistic demands. It raised questions the industry couldn't ignore. When criminals upgrade their gear, how should the law-abiding respond? The Registered Magnum's answer was straightforward: more energy, better accuracy, and a revolver you could trust under stress. Did it change policing overnight? No. Did it define the pathway for every Magnum revolver that followed? Absolutely. Priced near $4,000. Taurus Raging Bull. Taurus shook the revolver market by making true Magnum power accessible. The Raging Bull put 454 Castle energy into a platform that ordinary shooters could actually buy, not just custom clients with deep pockets. Mechanically, it pairs a beefy frame with a dual-cylinder lock system to handle high pressures, a ported barrel to help tame muzzle rise, and cushioned grips to mitigate felt recoil. That combination turns an otherwise brutal cartridge into something usable without sacrificing durability. On the range, the Raging Bull announces itself: 2-foot muzzle flash in low light, a roar that clears the air, and a concussion many lighter guns simply cannot tolerate. Indoor ranges sometimes ban them. Outdoors, they demand respect. Yet what makes the Raging Bull important isn't showmanship, it's utility. Hunters take these into bear country because a single, well-placed .454 round can stop a charging animal. Ported barrels and modern ergonomics reduce muzzle climb. But does that make the recoil pleasant? No. Does it make the gun controllable enough to do real work? Yes. Tactically, the Raging Bull democratized power. Where big-bore revolvers were once boutique items for wealthy collectors or specialized guides, Taurus offered a working man's elephant gun. Its practicality is simple: massive energy, stout construction, and a price point that brings capability to more users. If your mission is stopping large, dangerous game in a remote spot where a miss isn't an option, can you afford not to consider a Raging Bull? Price near $700. Freedom Arms Model 83. Freedom Arms answered a question: what happens when a revolver is engineered without compromise? The Model 83 isn't for impulse buyers. It's a one-shot, single-action crafted in Wyoming, made of heat-treated stainless steel with an unfluted solid cylinder designed to contain enormous pressures. That solidity is intentional. This gun was built to shoot Super Magnum cartridges day after day with surgical accuracy. Performance-wise, the Model 83 blurs the line between rifle and handgun. In capable hands, 2-inch groups at 100 yards are common with the right load. That kind of accuracy from a handgun isn't any accident. Tight tolerances, meticulous fitting, and a design ethos focused on repeatable performance. The trade-offs are obvious. Recoil is ferocious, the price is steep, and the gun is heavy. But when you need handgun stopping power that can ethically take large game at extended distances, the Model 83 delivers where most handguns only promise. Philosophically, Freedom Arms represents a craft mindset in firearms. Precision over flash, substance over spectacle. Who buys this? Hunters and professionals who demand consistent rifle-like terminal performance from a handgun. Is it practical for daily carry? Absolutely not. Is it a practical tool for specific high-stakes hunting scenarios? Without question. Price near $3,000. Colt Python. The Colt Python is the revolver people point to when they talk about fit and finish. Introduced as the Rolls-Royce of revolvers, the Python married hand-fitted parts, a mirror-polished finish, and a trigger that many shooters still call unmatched. It wasn't only about looks. The Python's tight cylinder lockup and match-grade barrel translated to accuracy that outpaced many contemporaries. For cops, competitors, and collectors, the Python offered an edge, predictable, surgical shot placement under stress. That buttery trigger encouraged deliberate shots rather than flinched, panicked strings. When Clint Eastwood waved a .44 Magnum on screen, a different culture awakened. When precision shooters used Pythons, professionals took notice. Colt ceased production for years as demand and collectability rose. Their 2020 reintroduction confirmed the Python's enduring appeal. The Python's lesson is aesthetic and technical. Precision machining and attention to interface make a revolver not just powerful but eminently usable. In a gunfight, do you want brute force or refined controllability? The Python argues convincingly for the latter, showing that lethality also depends on how reliably a shooter can place each shot. Price near $1,400. Webley MK VI. The Webley MK VI is the archetype of a service revolver built for close, brutal combat. Chambered in .455 Webley with a characteristic top-break frame and automatic ejector, the MK6 was Britain's frontline answer in World War I. It wasn't fast in the modern sense, but it was devastating up close. A 265-grain bullet moving at roughly 600 feet per second hits like a sledgehammer, and in trench fights, that blunt force could end an engagement instantly. Fielded in mud, rain, and chaos, the Webley proved the value of a design optimized for reliability and ease of use under stress. Its top-break action allowed rapid reloads even with dirty hands, and its simple, rugged construction tolerated the grime of the front. For soldiers, that meant a dependable tool when malfunction was a death sentence. Was it elegant? Not especially. Was it effective? Absolutely. Historically, the Webley MK VI embodies the utilitarian end of revolver evolution. Stop the enemy, survive, and repeat. In a world that worships high velocity and shiny metallurgy, the Webley asks a blunt question. When everything else fails, what do you want in your hand? Price near $400. Magnum Research BFR. The Magnum Research BFR asks a simple question. Why choose between a rifle and a handgun? Magnum Research answered by building a revolver large enough to accept true rifle cartridges. Mechanically, it's a single-action 5-shot platform built on a beefy frame and robust locking surfaces to handle rounds like .45-70 Government .44 Magnum and more exotic chambers that were previously rifle-only. Barrel lengths and chamberings vary, but the design intent is constant. Deliver rifle ballistics from a wheel gun. On the range, the BFR behaves less like a concealed carry piece and more like an AR. Who buys a BFR and why? Hunters who want a handgun that can substitute for a rifle in tight scenarios, collectors chasing mechanical extremes, and shooters who appreciate the engineering challenge. Is it practical for everyday carry or quick defensive use? No. Is it a practical solution when you need a single, portable tool that still delivers rifle-level terminal effects? Absolutely. When a rifle is impractical but stopping power is non-negotiable, the BFR provides an uncompromising answer, priced near $1,200. Ruger Super Redhawk Alaskan. The Ruger Super Redhawk Alaskan condenses stopping power into a short package designed for last-chance defense against dangerous game. With a 2.5-inch barrel and chambering in .454 Casull or .44 Magnum in some variants, Ruger prioritized immediate effectiveness at very short ranges over ballistic efficiency at distance. The gun's heavy frame, dual locking system, and stout construction are there to survive repeated hard use in unforgiving environments. Performance from a snub barrel .454 is raw and immediate. Large flame, thunderous blast, and a recoil impulse that can catch inexperienced shooters off guard. But in bear country, close encounters happen close, and the Alaskan's design philosophy is simple: maximize terminal effect within arm's reach. The short sight radius and compact profile make it carryable in a chest holster or a pack. The trade-off is a loss of velocity, but not of stopping capability where it counts. The Alaskan is a tool for people who plan for worst-case scenarios. Its existence answers a clear question. If a charging brown bear reaches your personal space, do you want a compact, powerful handgun or a lighter, more polite sidearm? For many wilderness professionals and hunters, the Alaskan is the friend they pray they never have to use but are damn glad to carry. Could you live with its recoil to buy the chance to live through a bear encounter? That's precisely the calculus Ruger designed for. Price near $1,100. Smith & Wesson Model 460 XVR. Speed changes engagement math, and the Smith & Wesson Model 460 XVR turned velocity into a defining trait. Chambered for the 460 S&W Magnum, this revolver pushes 200-grain bullets at velocities exceeding most production handguns by a wide margin, numbers that bring rifle-like flat trajectories and less pronounced drop at range. The XVR platform pairs that ballistic profile with a robust frame and the option to shoot softer factory loads like 40-54 Casull and 45 Colt for practice or versatility. The real-world payoff is straightforward. More speed equals easier range estimation and longer effective handgun reach. Hunters with optics on these revolvers report taking game beyond 150 to 200 yards that would be challenging with traditional magnums. The trade-offs are mechanical stress, fierce recoil, and muzzle blast that rivals small shotgun reports. But when your mission demands reliable terminal performance at extended distances, the XVR's approach makes sense. This revolver is for specialists, handloaders chasing specific ballistics, guides wanting a single platform that covers a spectrum of roles, and shooters who accept recoil as the cost of extended reach. Do you want a revolver that behaves like a carbine at 200 yards, or do you prefer the gentler recoil of conventional wheel guns? The Model 460 XVR forces an answer by offering a measurable advantage where distance or penetration matters most. Price near $1,300. Colt Walker 1847. The Colt Walker 1847 is an artifact of an era when more powder and more lead were the simplest solutions to lethality. Built to the demands of mounted riflemen and Texas Rangers, the Walker's 9-inch barrel and massive chambers held charges far larger than contemporaries. At roughly 4.5 pounds unloaded, it was cumbersome, but that mass delivered stopping power previously reserved for long arms, one-shot incapacitation at ranges that surprised contemporaries. Mechanically primitive by modern standards, the Walker relied on large black powder charges and heavy lead balls to do its work. That brute force philosophy had consequences. Cylinder failures were reported when users overcharged, and the gun's weight made it awkward for extended carry. Yet in its historical context, the Walker solved a mission-critical problem. Give mounted troops a handgun that could reach out and alter the fight at meaningful distances. Its legacy is foundational. The Walker proved that a handgun could be decisive on the battlefield, and that designers would chase increasing power when the tactical need demanded it. It also served as a cautionary tale. Push the envelope without regard for material limits, and failures will follow. So, which lesson matters more? Risk the occasional mechanical failure for unmatched stopping power, or engineer conservative safety margins at the expense of peak performance? Price near $1,200 for reproductions. Russian RSH-12. The RSH-12 reads like someone asked, what if a revolver could double as an anti-material tool? Russia answered with a 5-shot wheel gun chambered for 12.7 by 55 mm STs to 130, a cartridge that started life in rifles and ended up in a handheld platform with a folding stock and optics. That's not a marginal tweak. It's a redefinition of what a handgun can be. Mechanically, the RSH-12 borrows layout ideas from bottom chamber designs to help tame the volcanic recoil you'd expect from such large projectiles, and it's built around the explicit intention of breaching, defeating armor, and stopping vehicles or light materiel at close range. What problems does that solve on the modern battlefield? Doorways, barricades, and protected threats suddenly become problems you can engage with one platform. Operationally, the RSH-12 carries specialized loads, armor-piercing, and in some descriptions even explosive or fragmenting projectiles. That variety turns the revolver into a tactical toolbox. A single weapon that can punch holes in composite armor, defeat barriers, or create denial effects in urban fighting. The folding stock and optic mount transform it from a hip-held shock tool into a shouldered, aimed system for precise short-range engagements. Who needs this kind of capability? Special units who must clear hardened positions or respond to asymmetric threats where rifles are impractical. There's an inevitable trade-off: heavy recoil, punishing blast, and a logistics burden for rare ammo types. But ask yourself, is the cost of a specialized tool worth the mission flexibility it buys? For forces that value overmatch in close urban fights, the answer is often yes. The RSH-12 proves a broader point. Revolver architecture still has room for radical reinterpretation when the tactical brief demands it. Price near $1,500. Colt Single Action Army Peacemaker. If you want to trace a cultural lineage of American sidearms, few names loom larger than the Colt Single Action Army Peacemaker. Adopted in 1873 and chambered in .45 Colt, the Peacemaker is classic in form and function. Single-action operation, 6-shot cylinder, and a balance that suited cavalry and civilian carry alike. Its strength wasn't in ballistic novelty so much as fitting a tactical niche, a heavy, slow-moving slug that hit hard in an era dominated by single-shot long arms. The Peacemaker's real power lies in its narrative weight. It shaped the iconography of the West. Lawmen, outlaws, and legends all carried variants, and that cultural identity feeds back into its desirability. Technically, the .45 Colt round of that era was a hard-hitting projectile at close ranges. The revolver's geometry and sighting made it a reliable combative tool in melee or short-range engagements. Over 350,000 produced in its first generation, the design proved durable and repeatable enough to be revived and copied for more than a century. Is the single-action army still relevant beyond nostalgia? If your metric is historical influence and ergonomic clarity, absolutely. If your metric is raw ballistic modernity, less so. But the Peacemaker asks a different question. What kind of gun becomes the standard for an entire frontier? The answer is one that is simple, reliable, and widely adopted, and that is precisely what Colt delivered. Price near $2,000. Smith & Wesson Model 29. What happens when an already potent cartridge becomes a cultural thunderclap? The Model 29 and the .44. Magnum answered that question. Introduced in 1955 and vaulted to icon fame by Clint Eastwood's on-screen swagger, the 29 made high Magnum handgun power a household idea. Technically, it pushed .44 Magnum performance into a production revolver that could be owned by civilians, hunters, and a subset of law enforcement. Ballistically, the cartridge could generate muzzle energies sufficient to punch through car doors and heavy barriers. Not subtle, but undeniably effective. Its practical life is split between utility and spectacle. Hunters embraced the 29 for its terminal performance on boar and deer. Civilians and collectors embraced its persona. The Model 29's recoil and muzzle blast aren't forgiving, and accurate rapid follow-ups are hard without training and a solid grip. But isn't part of the design's allure precisely the raw declaration of power? That visceral experience of recoil, flash, and sound creates a psychological edge as much as a ballistic one. The Model 29's legacy is twofold. It normalized Magnum power in production handguns, and it created a pop culture mythos that still sells guns. Does that cheapen the engineering or amplify it? Arguably both. The 29 shows that a revolver can be a practical hunting tool and a symbolic artifact at once, a rare duality in firearms. Price near $1,000. Smith & Wesson Model 500. Where do you stop if the design brief is, make the most powerful production revolver? Smith & Wesson stopped with the Model 500. Launched in 2003, around the 500 S&W Magnum cartridge, this 5-shot X-frame revolver eclipses most production handguns in muzzle energy, well over 3,000 foot-pounds with heavy loads. Those numbers aren't abstract. They translate to terminal performance that lets skilled shooters ethically take elk and other large game at handgun ranges unheard of for standard wheel guns. The Model 500's physicality is part of its message. It is heavy, loud, and punishing. Shooters report broken noses and knocked-out stances when they fail to respect the blast. Indoor ranges sometimes ban it for the concussion alone. And yet, for hunters and ballistic tinkerers, that brute force solves problems no lighter handgun can. Deeper penetration, long-range handgun reach, and terminal effects that rival older rifles. The gun's design, massive cylinder, reinforced frame, and long sight radius in some configs, is intentionally uncompromising. So, who is the Model 500 for? Someone who values ultimate stopping power and accepts recoil and blast as the price. Is there a practical ceiling to handgun power? The 500 argues no, at least within commercial safety margins. But it also asks another question. When power disrupts the rules of handling and range safety, how should range operators and users adapt? The Model 500 forces the community to reckon with limits and responsibilities even as it pushes performance forward. Price near $1,400. From Civil War black powder to modern super magnums, these revolvers prove one truth. The wheel gun isn't obsolete, it's evolving. Each model on this list carries a legacy of power, precision, and survival, built for shooters who demand reliability when everything else fails. Whether you favor historical icons or modern monsters, every trigger pull reminds you why revolvers still matter. So, tell us, which one would you bet your life on? Hit like, drop your pick in the comments, and subscribe to Firearm Standard for more no-nonsense firepower reviews.